Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to make paints. Here you have your average watercolor paint. Most of the paints we'll talk about today are going to be water-based. This paint, we simply use a paintbrush, dip our paintbrush in water, and then dip it into the paint, and then paint onto the picture that we're doing. We need to rinse out our paintbrush between colors in the water cup. But if you don't have watercolor paints at home, what are you going to do? So any brush will work very well for this project. However, some of you might go, but I don't have any brushes. If you have Q-tips, cotton balls, old toothbrushes, toilet paper, tissues, rags, and when I say rags, I mean not your clothing unless they are old clothing that mom, dad, someone who loves you at home said, it's okay to rip this and use this. Otherwise, do not use your clothing. You can also use sponges. Now those things will be good for the watercolor paint that I'm going to be talking about. Later on, when you get to the other types of paint, which are more like finger paints and tempera paints, you can use any object, like stamping almost. You can use flowers as well. Number 2, the easiest way to do watercolors, if you have them at home, are to use food coloring. Simply add a couple drops of food coloring to water to get that color that you need. You can also mix your food coloring inside the water to try and get a different color. You typically have yellow, red, and blue, which are your primary colors. If you mix them with anything, mix those two together, you'll end up with your secondary colors. Typically, you have a green in there as well. Green is a secondary color. But like I said, if you mix your primaries together, you should be able to get a secondary color. Next, you can use things like Kool-Aid packets or different juice drinks. My suggestion is to use the Kool-Aid packets without sugar. I believe the Kool-Aid packets do not come with sugar, but if you use the Kool-Aid with sugar in it, it will be sticky and it will attract ants. Fun fact, I had a friend in high school dye his hair with Kool-Aid. He said it was bad to use Kool-Aid that had sugar in it because it made his hair very sticky and hard, almost like gel. Here I used fabric softener. I put a little bit of water in mine, which was probably a bad idea. If I went straight blue downy fabric softener, I think it would have been a lot better. My suggestion, if it is too light, let it dry and paint over it again after it's dried, and keep doing that until you get the correct color. You can use coffee. Here I used a K-cup, and this was an old one, and I simply put it in a little bit of warm water and shook it up and down in order to get some of that out. It came out a little bit lighter, but what you can do is just ask mom, dad, whoever loves you at home to give you a little bit of their coffee for painting reasons. If you have regular coffee that you put in a coffee maker, just put it in a filter and again, dip it, shake it up and down in warm water and you'll get a brownish color water. In this picture, I used a tea bag in warm water. You can do that, or you can just let it sit in your window in the sun and it will slowly dissipate. The color will come out of the tea bag. You can also move the tea bag up and down. This gives you another brown color, but it's not exactly the same as the coffee color. Running out of ideas, need some different colors, you can try anything at home. Here I tried some vitamin gummies. I only used 2 and I used more water than I should have. I should have fixed that a little bit. Next time I know. You can use pretty much anything with color and try to see if it dissolves in water. If it does dissolve, you have watercolor. Another way to paint is to use your average water-based markers. Color on a piece of paper and then add a little bit of water over top of it using a Q-tip or a paintbrush or something like that. And now those marker lines just turned into watercolor lines. Here, a student shared with me some paints that she mixed. She used tomato juice, she tried coffee, and she tried turmeric powder, which you can find in like your spice rack. You can also use like blueberry juice, other types of fruits and vegetables. release coloring, you are able to use that as well. The next 3 slides have thicker paints. You can use them the same way as the watercolors I spoke about, but you may also be able to use them as stamps. You may stamp with them using cut fruit and vegetables, or flowers, leaves, and more. I'd like to thank the YouTuber Babble Dabble Do for this information. I've included her page or this information on the screen. The next paint is homemade paint called pudding paint. You can use vanilla pudding and use food coloring and mix it up. If you are using a pudding mix, again, use the dry mix of vanilla pudding and follow the directions like usual. Make sure that the water is ice cold. Paint number 2 is corn syrup paint. Use clear corn syrup with a little bit of food coloring and you have paint. It is not really sticky, a little sticky as you apply it, but it dries fine. The last paint we're going to talk about is your cornstarch and vinegar paint. This is your thickest paint that you can make on this video. This is going to be the one that's best for the stamping. It will do a little bit of